They called them the untamable trio. 3 little whirlwinds that no nanny could survive. Dozens had tried, all had failed. Until one rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, but she carried something far more dangerous than money. She carried patience, courage, and a heart that could change everything. The rain had turned the streets of Manhattan into rivers of shimmering reflections. Amelia Carter tightened her coat around her, the cheap fabric already soaked through, as she clutched the folded job listing in her hand. Live-in nanny needed. Immediate start. Excellent pay. It sounded too good to be true, but when you're a single mom with rent due and a son who needs new shoes, you don't overthink miracles. You grab them. Her taxi stopped in front of an imposing wrought iron gate. Behind it rose a mansion so grand it looked like it belonged in a movie. 3 stories of pale stone, arched windows glowing with warm light, and a front garden landscaped like a royal palace. She swallowed hard, handed the driver her last crumpled bill, and stepped into the rain. By the time the butler opened the door, Amelia was dripping from head to toe. I'm here for the nanny position, she managed. The butler, a tall man with silver hair and a perfectly straight posture, gave her a slow once-over. His lips pressed into a thin line. "You're early," he said, voice clipped. "Mr. Hawthorne will see you now." Inside, the air smelled faintly of sandalwood and something warm like cinnamon. The floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Amelia tried not to gape, but her thrift store boots squeaked with every step, betraying her nervousness. They stopped in front of a study with a massive oak desk. Behind it stood a man who looked like he'd stepped straight out of a Wall Street magazine. Dark, neatly styled hair, an expensive navy suit, and the kind of jawline sculptors dream of capturing. He looked up from his laptop, and for a moment his eyes, gray as a winter sky, locked on hers. "Miss Carter," he said, as if tasting her name. "You're here about the nanny job." "Yes, sir." She straightened, refusing to let him see how intimidated she felt. "I have experience." I'll be frank," he interrupted, leaning back in his chair. "My triplets are challenging. No nanny has lasted more than a day." His tone carried a hint of amusement, though his expression was unreadable. "If you think you can handle them, you'll start now. No trial period. The pay will be substantial." Her stomach fluttered. "I'll handle them." One corner of his mouth twitched. Was it a smirk? "We'll see." The butler led her upstairs, past paintings worth more than her entire apartment building, to a brightly colored playroom. Before she could even step inside, something whizzed past her ear and hit the wall with a soft thud. She turned to see 3 identical faces, 2 boys and a girl, grinning like little devils. The girl, her blonde hair in messy pigtails, pointed a foam dart gun at Amelia. "You're new," she announced. "You won't last till dinner." The older-looking boy crossed his arms. "We made Mrs. Reynolds cry in 20 minutes. The younger boy grinned wider. "Bet we can beat that record." Amelia's heart pounded, but she forced a calm smile. "You must be Chloe, Max, and Jack," she said, crouching to their level. "Good. I like knowing who I'm going to win against." They blinked in surprise. "You like games?" Max asked cautiously. "Love them," she said. "And I never lose." Within minutes, she was on the floor, helping them build a blanket fort so elaborate it would have impressed an architect. They gave her suspicious glances, clearly waiting for her to snap like the others. But instead of scolding them for scattering toys everywhere, she joined in. When Chloe demanded a story, Amelia told one about pirates and hidden treasure, adding twists that made them giggle until they toppled over. By the time dinner was called, the triplets were clinging to her hands, tugging her toward the dining room. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Mr. Hawthorne, Alexander, as the butler had called him earlier, watching the scene with an expression Amelia couldn't quite read. The triplets chatted excitedly between bites, throwing in, "Miss Amelia says." So often it was almost comical. "You survived the first hour," Alexander said quietly when the children were distracted. "Impressive." She sipped her water, trying to ignore the way his voice did strange things to her heartbeat. "They're not bad kids," she said. "They just want someone to see them." Something flickered in his eyes at that, but he said nothing. That night, after tucking the triplets into bed, Amelia found herself wandering to the window at the end of the hall. The rain had stopped, and the city glittered in the distance. She thought of her own son, Liam, staying with her neighbor until she could figure out a permanent arrangement. This job could be their fresh start, if she could last. A deep voice behind her broke her thoughts. "They like you," Alexander said. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his gaze intense. She smiled faintly. "It's just the first day." "No," he said. "I think you might actually make it past tomorrow." The air between them seemed to hum. Amelia told herself it was just exhaustion, but the way his eyes lingered made her pulse race. For the first time in years, she felt the tiniest spark of something she'd almost forgotten: hope. The next morning, Amelia woke to the sound of feet pounding down the hallway like a stampede. She threw on a sweater and hurried toward the noise, bracing for disaster. In the kitchen, she found the triplets perched on the counter, attempting to make pancakes. Batter dripped onto the marble floor. A pot was smoking on the stove, and Max was wearing a whisk as a crown. "Breakfast champions," Jack declared proudly. Amelia didn't yell. She didn't scold. Instead, she grabbed a spatula and said, "All right, chefs, let's make these the best pancakes this house has ever seen." By the time Alexander walked in, drawn by the scent of something edible, the chaos had been transformed into a neat stack of golden pancakes topped with berries. The triplets sat at the table, faces sticky with syrup but beaming. "You cooked with them?" Alexander asked, looking genuinely surprised. "They cooked with me," Amelia corrected. "Big difference." He studied her for a moment before a small, rare smile tugged at his lips. "You're not like the others." The days that followed blurred into a rhythm. Mornings were filled with school drop-offs, afternoons with homework and games, and evenings with bedtime stories. Amelia found herself growing attached, not just to the children but to the house itself, which was beginning to feel less like a palace and more like a home. Still, Alexander was a mystery. He was polite, always impeccably dressed, and kept his conversations short. Yet sometimes she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was something in his gaze, something warmer than the cool, detached image he projected. On the fifth day, disaster struck. Amelia had just finished helping Chloe with her art project when Max burst into the playroom, pale and frantic. "Jack's stuck." "Stuck where?" she demanded. "In the tree," Max said, already running toward the garden. Sure enough, Jack was 10 feet up in a sprawling oak tree, clinging to a branch that looked far too thin to hold him. The butler hovered nearby, helpless. "He climbed up there chasing the neighbor's cat," he explained. Amelia's heart raced. "Jack, sweetheart, hold on. I'm coming." She kicked off her shoes and scrambled up the trunk, ignoring the expensive dress she was wearing. The branch wobbled under her as she reached him. "Okay, we're going to climb down together. Step where I step." Jack's lower lip trembled. "I'm sorry." "It's all right," she said softly, steadying him. "I've got you." Took a few tense minutes, but they made it down safely. The moment her feet touched the ground, Jack threw his arms around her neck and refused to let go. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, Alexander appeared at the kitchen doorway. He looked unsettled. "The staff told me what happened," he said. "You climbed that tree yourself." "Yes," Amelia said, rinsing a mug. "I wasn't going to wait for a ladder while he was up there scared." Alexander stepped closer, his gaze sharper now. "Do you know how many nannies would have just called the fire department?" "Probably most of them," she admitted, meeting his eyes. "But I'm not most of them." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, charged. Alexander's jaw tightened, as if he were holding back words. Finally he said, "My children, they've lost a lot. Their mother passed away 2 years ago. Since then, people come and go, but no one stays." I don't let them get attached easily. Amelia's chest ached. I understand. My son's father left before Liam was born. I know what it's like to want to protect them from another goodbye. His eyes softened at that, and for the first time, she saw past the polished exterior to the man underneath, a man who carried his own grief like a shadow. That night, she lay awake in the small bedroom the family had given her. She told herself she was here for the job, for the paycheck that could change her and Liam's lives. But the truth was more complicated. She was beginning to care about this family, about the triplets' mischievous laughter and even Alexander's guarded silences. And she couldn't shake the way her heart had raced when he'd looked at her, like she wasn't just another employee. 2 days later, Alexander returned home early from a business trip. Amelia was in the backyard, helping the triplets build a cardboard rocket ship, when he appeared at the patio door. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly mussed, and he was smiling, really smiling, for the first time she'd seen. "What's all this?" he asked. "Space mission," Chloe announced. "Miss Amelia says we're going to the moon." Alexander's brows lifted. "The moon, huh? Do you have room for one more crew member?" The triplets cheered, and Amelia watched, stunned, as the cold, unreachable businessman crawled inside the cardboard rocket with his children. He laughed when Max accidentally knocked over one of the panels, and the sound did something strange to her chest. For the first time, she thought maybe the ice around Alexander Hawthorne's heart wasn't unbreakable after all. That evening, after the triplets were in bed, Amelia found herself in the study, returning a book Chloe had borrowed. Alexander was there, leaning against his desk with a glass of scotch. He looked up as she entered. "You've changed this house," he said quietly. "They're happier. I'm happier." She smiled faintly. Maybe all they needed was someone who could keep up with them. Or maybe they needed someone who cared. His gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. "You've done more in a week than anyone else has in 2 years." Her breath caught. The space between them felt smaller, charged with something unspoken. She told herself to step back, to keep this professional. But when he smiled, slow, deliberate, it was all she could do not to fall into the pull of it. By the time she left the study, Amelia knew one thing for certain. She was in dangerous territory. And she wasn't sure she wanted to find the way out. The first snow of the season arrived overnight, dusting the city in white. When Amelia opened the curtains in the triplets' playroom, Chloe gasped, Max hooped, and Jack shouted, "Snowball fight!" By the time they tumbled outside in layers of scarves and hats, Alexander was already there, his breath clouding in the frosty air. "I heard there's a war starting," he said, crouching to scoop up snow. The triplets squealed, pelting him with soft snowballs. He retaliated gently, laughing as they dodged behind Amelia. She joined in without hesitation, tossing a perfectly aimed snowball that hit him square on the shoulder. He turned slowly, mock offense in his eyes. "You've made a powerful enemy, Miss Carter. You'll have to catch me first," she shot back, darting away. When the battle ended in breathless truce, the 5 of them collapsed into the snow, their laughter echoing across the garden. Amelia caught Alexander looking at her, not the guarded, calculating look she'd seen before, but something warmer, something that made her forget about the cold. That evening, after the children had been tucked into bed with mugs of hot chocolate, Alexander found Amelia in the kitchen. She was humming softly as she washed the last of the mugs, her hair escaping its bun in gentle waves. "You're staying late," he remarked. She glanced over her shoulder. "Just finishing up. I like to leave things ready for the morning." For a moment he didn't say anything. Then quietly, "I meant what I said the other night. You've made a difference here." She set the mug aside and dried her hands, turning to face him. "It's easy to care about them. They're great kids." "They are," he said, his gaze lingering on her. "And they've grown attached to you. Which means, I have too." Her heart stumbled in her chest. "Alexander." "I know," he said quickly, as if reading her hesitation. "You're here as their nanny. You have your own life, your own son. I'm not asking for anything. Except maybe a chance." She didn't know what to say. Her life had been about survival for so long, paychecks, schedules, making ends meet, that the idea of wanting something for herself felt almost dangerous. But the way he was looking at her, like she was more than just a fleeting presence in his life, made her wonder if maybe danger wasn't always a bad thing. A week later, that question was put to the test. Liam was visiting for the first time. His eyes wide as he explored the mansion. The triplets had immediately adopted him into their ranks, dragging him into a game of indoor treasure hunt. Amelia watched from the kitchen doorway, her chest swelling at the sight. But then Liam tripped, scraping his knee. Before Amelia could move, Alexander was there, kneeling beside him, gentle but steady, distracting him with a story while Amelia fetched a bandage. The sight of the powerful businessman tending to her son so naturally did something irreversible to her heart. That night, after Liam had fallen asleep in the guest room, Amelia stepped into the study. Alexander was there, reading. He looked up, closing the book slowly. "I saw the way you were with him," she said softly. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," he replied simply. "He's important to you. That makes him important to me." She felt her throat tighten. "You're not what I expected when I walked in here that first day." "What did you expect? A man too busy for his kids. Someone who just wanted them kept quiet." He smiled faintly. "And what do you see now?" She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Someone who loves them more than anything. Someone who's letting me in." For a moment, the world outside the study ceased to exist. His gaze searched hers, and then slowly he reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, warm against her cheek. "Amelia," he murmured, as if her name were something rare and precious. She didn't remember who moved first, only that suddenly he was kissing her, gentle at first, then deeper, like he'd been holding back for too long. She melted into it, her hands curling into the fabric of his shirt, the weight of years of loneliness lifting with every heartbeat. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless. "We shouldn't." "Maybe not," he said, his voice low. "But I don't regret it." Neither did she. The next morning, the triplets caught them in the kitchen, sharing coffee and a smile. Chloe tilted her head suspiciously. "Why are you looking at each other like that?" Alexander didn't miss a beat. "Because Miss Amelia makes the best pancakes in the world." The children accepted this answer with excitement, demanding a batch immediately. As Amelia moved to get the ingredients, Alexander brushed past her, his hand brushing hers in a quiet promise. It wasn't a fairy tale. They still had boundaries to navigate, children to protect, and two separate lives to blend. But as snow fell softly outside and the scent of pancakes filled the air, Amelia realized something. She had survived more than just a day here. She had found a place and people worth staying for. And maybe, just maybe, love had been waiting for her on the other side of that knock at the door.